In the stillness of the night, when the stars had softened into whispers, and the trees had long since ceased to speak, a hush blanketed the world. It was not silence born of emptiness, but of rest. A sacred pause between the breath of day and the sigh of dreams. Somewhere, far from noise and near to the edge of a quiet forest, the wind moved gently through the leaves like a mother brushing the hair of a sleeping child. The moon cast its silver light over a worn dirt path, revealing footsteps too faded to follow. All was calm, all was slow. A man walked that path, barefoot and thin, cloaked in robes that hung like forgotten cloth from his shoulders. His eyes, though sunken, held a quiet searching, like a candle left to burn through the longest night. In his hands, he carried nothing but a bowl, a simple clay bowl worn smooth by time and touch. He was a beggar, though he never asked aloud. The bowl did all the asking for him. It waited as he did, in silence. Each morning he rose with the sun and wandered through the village. Each evening he returned to the edge of the woods with little more than the breath in his lungs and the dust on his feet. His stomach often sang with hunger, yet he had grown used to the song. People passed him by. Some looked away. Some did not see him at all. And some, the kindest, dropped a handful of rice into the bowl without a word. The man would nod gently and walk on. Always on. He never complained. Not to the villagers, not to the wind, not even to the stars. But inside, the question stirred. Why do I carry this bowl? Why do I keep hoping it will be filled? Why does the world seem so full, and yet I feel so empty? The forest, patient and ancient, listened to his silence. It wrapped him in stillness each night. In the early hours before dawn, he sometimes dreamed. Dreams of warm hands, of laughter, of a home he could no longer remember. One night, as he sat by the fireless circle of stones he called home, the moon rose full and clear. Its light fell directly upon the bowl, and for the first time in many nights, the man reached out and held it in both hands, not as a tool, but as a question. He peered into its emptiness and whispered, barely audible, "What am I waiting for?" And the wind, gentle and slow, passed through the trees as if in answer, not with words, but with stillness. He closed his eyes. The bowl remained in his lap. That night, he did not dream. He simply breathed. Long, steady breaths, the kind that feel like falling into the earth, the kind that carry sorrow out with the exhale and bring nothing back with the inhale but space. Somewhere far away, a temple bell rang, faint and deep like the heart of the world reminding him, you are still here. And that, for now, was enough. The morning unfolded slowly, like a silk curtain being drawn back by invisible hands. The mist hung low over the fields, and the sun, still shy, peeked out through a veil of clouds. Birds began their songs not in celebration, but in quiet ritual, as if they too knew that something sacred walked among them. The man rose from the earth as he always did, slowly, without ceremony. He stretched his limbs with the caution of someone who had learned to expect pain. His joints ached, but his breath came easily. He looked down at the bowl beside him, empty, again. He did not frown. He did not sigh. He simply picked it up, cradling it with both hands, as though it were something fragile and dear. The village was already stirring. Smoke curled from thatched rooftops. The scent of boiling rice and warm broth floated in the air, making his stomach twist with memory more than hunger. He walked the same path he always walked, past the weaver's home, past the claymaker's shed, past the old fig tree where children sometimes played. Today they did not. He paused at the well, as he always did, not to drink, but to listen. The water echoed in the deep stone chamber, distant and unreachable, like so many things. The villagers noticed him, as they always did. Their eyes flicked toward the bowl, then away. Some turned their backs. One woman whispered something to her child and pulled him closer. The child stared. The man did not stop. He never did. He moved like a shadow, not disturbing the world, not leaving footprints. At the edge of the marketplace, he stood beneath a tree. He held the bowl before him, arms gently extended, not as a demand, but as an offering, as a question. A baker passed by. A handful of crumbs dropped in. A servant girl added the end of a carrot. An old man glanced at him, paused, then walked away. He accepted it all with a slight bow, his eyes always lowered. The bowl made no judgment, neither did he. But within him, a quiet thought stirred. Why do they give only what they do not need? Why do they feed the bowl but never see the man? The sun climbed higher, the crowds thickened, yet the offering slowed. People hurried past, busy with their own hungers, their own needs. By midday, he stepped away from the tree. The bowl was not full nor empty. It was simply as it was. He returned to the forest's edge and sat upon a smooth rock. There in the stillness, he sorted what little food he had received. He placed it carefully on a leaf, like a ritual, like worship. He ate slowly, chewing each bite as if it were the first he had ever tasted. When he finished, he cleaned the bowl with water from a stream, letting it dry in the sunlight beside him. He watched the light dance across its surface. It shimmered, not with gold, but with stillness. And then a thought. Perhaps the bowl is not for holding food. Perhaps it is for holding truth. He placed the bowl before him and closed his eyes. He sat back straight, hands resting on his knees. The wind brushed past like an old friend. Time softened. The trees no longer stood around him. They listened. And in that space between breath and thought, between question and silence, something shifted. Not in the world, but in him. The afternoon sun poured through the canopy in slender beams, warm but not harsh, like fingers gently tracing the earth's surface. The man remained seated, his breath a rhythm in tune with the quiet forest around him. He did not count time. He did not measure stillness. He simply sat with the bowl before him and the questions inside him. Long ago, he had stopped expecting answers. The world did not answer such questions. Why suffering? Why loneliness? Why the hunger that gnawed at both the belly and the soul? The world had its own language, spoken through rustling leaves and shifting shadows, and it rarely translated into words. But today, something was different. The silence didn't just surround him, it settled within. Memories floated to the surface like fallen leaves drifting on a pond. He remembered the first day he held the bowl. A kind monk in a far-off village had handed it to him when he was a boy, saying only, "Carry this with dignity. It will teach you what no one else can." He hadn't understood then. He barely understood now. He had thought the bowl was a symbol of dependence, a sign of lack. But over the years, he had noticed something else. The bowl never held more than what he needed to survive. And even when it was empty, he was not gone. The thought lingered like incense. If the bowl is never full, is it broken? Or is it teaching me how to let go? Just then, a rustling sound, light footsteps. He opened his eyes. A child stood a few feet away, barefoot and holding a small clay pot. Her eyes were wide, unafraid. She stepped forward, hesitated, and then sat cross-legged across from him. For a long moment, they said nothing. Finally, she whispered, "Why is your bowl empty?" He looked down, then up, and answered softly, "Because today that is enough." The girl tilted her head. "Doesn't it make you sad?" He smiled, faintly. "Only when I forget what the bowl is really for." She was silent for a moment, then leaned forward and poured a few grains of rice from her pot into his bowl. Now it's not empty. He looked at the rice, just enough to see, not enough to satisfy. He nodded. "Thank you, little one. You have given me more than food." She looked puzzled. "I only gave rice." He touched the bowl gently. "You gave without fear, without being asked. That is rare." The girl thought for a moment. "My mother says we should always give when we can." He met her gaze. "Your mother is wise." She looked around. "Do you live here, in the forest?" He nodded. "For now." She pointed at the bowl. "Do you always carry it?" "Yes, even when it's empty, especially then." She laughed, a clear, ringing sound that danced through the trees like birdsong. "That doesn't make sense." He laughed too, though more softly. "No, but not everything that is true makes sense." She considered this, then stood up. "I like your bowl. It's quiet." He watched her turn and walk back toward the village path. The wind rustled behind her, carrying the scent of dust and blossoms. He looked down at the grains of rice and felt the warmth of her gesture more than the food itself. Perhaps the bowl was not only a symbol of his hunger, perhaps it was a mirror for the world. He closed his eyes once more, letting the forest return to its whispering hush. A single phrase echoed in his heart like a bell. Emptiness is not absence, it is readiness. The day leaned gently toward evening, and the light that once poured through the trees now stretched long and golden across the forest floor. Shadows grew tender, not heavy. The man remained where he sat, beside his bowl, beside the lingering warmth of the child's gift. The grains of rice were gone now, consumed slowly and with reverence. But something had stayed, not in the bowl, but in the space around it. He looked to the sky, where a few wisps of cloud drifted like soft thoughts unspoken. The air was still, not with silence, but with attention. Then he felt it. Before he heard the footsteps, before the wind shifted, something inside him recognized the presence. Not a sound, not a face, but a calm that moved with great clarity. He opened his eyes. A man stood just beyond the trees, cloaked in robes that shimmered with the simplicity of saffron. His bearing was neither grand nor hidden. His walk was unhurried, but every step seemed to know its purpose. Around him, the birds did not flee. The forest, instead of retreating, leaned inward. The beggar lowered his gaze, not in fear, in reverence. Without understanding how, he knew this was not just a monk. This was the Buddha, the awakened one. The silence between them was vast and whole. The Buddha stepped forward, stopping a few feet away. His eyes, deep and unmoving, rested on the bowl. He spoke gently, his voice like water touching stone. "You carry it every day." The beggar nodded. "Yes. And do you believe it must be filled for you to be at peace?" The beggar hesitated. "I don't know. It feels wrong to carry it empty, as if I am unfinished." The Buddha stepped closer. "And yet you walk, and you breathe, and you continue." "Yes. Then perhaps it is not the bowl that must be filled, but the way you see it." The beggar looked down. "It is all I have." The Buddha's gaze softened. "Then it is enough." A breeze passed through the trees, lifting leaves into a slow spiral. The forest paused with them. The beggar asked, "Why does it ache, this emptiness? Why do I feel shame when others look and see it bare?" The Buddha sat beside him. The earth did not stir beneath him, only welcomed. "Because you have mistaken the bowl for your worth. You have let its emptiness echo louder than your breath." The beggar looked at his own hands. "I've spent years waiting for it to be full." The Buddha nodded. "And in that waiting, what have you missed?" The beggar blinked slowly. "The sky, the trees, the quiet." The Buddha placed a hand gently on the ground. "Then let today be your first meal of stillness." The beggar's eyes shimmered with something he had not felt in years, understanding without words. He asked, "Then I should not seek to fill it anymore." The Buddha smiled, not in contradiction, but in compassion. "You may receive, you may give, but do not believe the bowl defines you. It is only a shape. It can hold food, yes, but it can also hold gratitude, reflection, peace." The beggar breathed deeply. It felt different now, not survival, but presence. The Buddha stood. "A bowl is not full when it overflows. It is full when it no longer seeks." And with that, he turned and walked down the path, where the last light of day followed him gently. The beggar sat still, as the sky turned to rose and gold. He did not move. He did not cry. But inside him, something that had long been hungry finally began to rest. Night descended slowly, like a soft curtain falling over a weary stage. The forest, once lit with golden beams, now glowed with the quiet silver of moonlight. Crickets began their songs in steady rhythm, and the trees, tall and ancient, stood like silent sentinels in the dark. The bowl, still empty, rested beside the man, but it no longer felt like a symbol of lack. It had become something else, an echo of stillness, a vessel of meaning, invisible to the eye but deeply felt. He sat alone, yet not lonely. For the first time in years, the emptiness did not press against his chest. It opened before him, vast and gentle. He did not understand it fully. He did not need to. The words of the Buddha still rang within him, not as commands, but as gentle reminders carried on the breeze. A bowl is not full when it overflows. It is full when it no longer seeks. He repeated this to himself slowly, letting each syllable settle into the quiet space between breaths. No longer seek. What would that mean? Not to stop walking, not to stop receiving, but to stop measuring his worth by what the world gave or did not give. To stop believing that fullness only came from outside. The world had taught him that he was small, that he was nothing unless others poured something into him. But the Buddha had seen something else, something already whole. He lay back on the grass, hands folded across his chest, eyes gazing at the moon through a gap in the trees. The sky looked enormous now, not cold, but endless. He breathed it in slowly, and with every breath, the ache inside him softened. A memory returned, uninvited but welcome. He was a boy again, barefoot and laughing, chasing fireflies with hands outstretched, never catching them, but never needing to. The joy had been in the reaching, not the catching. The wonder had lived in the moment, not the result. And now, All these years later, he understood. The bowl had never failed him. He had failed to see it. How many times had he looked into it with disappointment, never realizing it had also held the sunrise, the rain, the tiny offerings of strangers, the warmth of his own hands, and now a grain of truth. The moonlight touched the rim of the bowl, and it shimmered faintly. For a moment, it looked not like clay, but like silver forged in the quiet furnace of experience. He turned to one side and pulled the bowl closer to his heart. It no longer mattered that it was empty. What mattered was that it was open, open to receive, open to reflect, open to rest. Sleep came softly, not as an escape, but as a gift. His breath slowed. The forest exhaled. The bowl, resting quietly in the night, reflected the moon. And in that reflection, all things were still, all things were whole, and nothing was missing. Dawn arrived not with noise, but with grace. The first light touched the forest like a whisper, brushing the tops of trees, tracing the curve of leaves, and gently stirring the air from its long night of stillness. The man awoke slowly, not startled, but as if rising from within a deeper part of himself. His breath was calm, steady. For a moment, he did not open his eyes. He simply listened. The forest had always been speaking. He just hadn't always known how to listen. Birdsong flowed gently through the canopy, a soft music that seemed to echo the rhythm of his heart. The earth beneath him felt firm yet forgiving, and the bowl still lay near his chest, as if it had kept watch over him through the night. He opened his eyes and turned to look at it. Empty, once again, but he smiled. There was no sting, no sorrow in its bareness. Instead, he felt gratitude, for the bowl was still here. It had not broken. It had not been lost. It was waiting, patient as ever. And for the first time, he realized, so was he. He sat up slowly, his movements deliberate. Every gesture became a form of meditation, brushing the leaves from his robe, folding his blanket, lifting the bowl with both hands. There was no rush. There was only presence. He rose and began to walk toward the village, just as he had done every day for years. But today the path felt different. Not shorter, not easier, just quieter, inside and out. As he walked, his mind did not race ahead to what he might receive. It did not fall back into what he had lacked. It stayed here, with each footstep, each breath, each tree that passed in silent blessing. At the edge of the village, he paused. Smoke rose from chimneys. The scent of morning rice and fried bread drifted through the air. People moved about with purpose, unaware that something small but extraordinary was approaching, a man who no longer sought. He found his usual spot, beneath the old tamarind tree, and stood silently. The bowl in his hands was no longer a cry for help. It had become a mirror, offering villagers the chance to see their own hearts. Some passed without notice. Some dropped bits of food. One woman offered a warm smile as she placed a ripe fig into the bowl. He bowed deeply, not because he was beneath her, but because he saw her clearly. A merchant approached and hesitated. "You are always here," the man said. "Yes," the beggar replied softly. "Why do you keep coming? Do you never grow tired of waiting?" He looked down at the bowl, then up again. "I do not come to wait. I come to be here." The merchant frowned. "But you ask for nothing?" He smiled. "Not asking is also a form of trust." The merchant looked puzzled, then slowly dropped a slice of bread into the bowl. He walked away with furrowed brows, but a softened step. The beggar sat down beneath the tree and slowly began to eat. Each bite was small, each chew deliberate. The food tasted no different than before, but everything about it felt new. He finished, cleaned the bowl carefully with a cloth he carried, and placed it beside him. Then he closed his eyes and returned to stillness. Children ran past, laughing. A dog barked at a bird. Somewhere, a pot clanged. Life moved around him unbothered. And yet, within that movement, he felt stillness. The bowl did not shine. It did not sing. But in its quiet way, it had taught him something that no temple wall could carve into stone. The world may never give you all you seek, but it will always give you enough to wake up. The sun had climbed gently into the sky, casting a warm golden hue across the village roofs and forest edge. The morning was alive, yet not hurried. There was rhythm in the footsteps of farmers, the chatter of vendors, the laughter of children carrying bundles of herbs. And amid it all, he sat, quiet, present, whole in his stillness. He had not moved from beneath the tamarind tree. The bowl rested beside him, clean and empty, but its emptiness did not trouble him. In fact, It offered a kind of companionship. It no longer asked to be filled. It simply existed, like him. As he sat with his eyes half closed, a boy approached cautiously, not running like the others, not laughing. He stood a few steps away, clutching a small rice cake wrapped in a banana leaf. The beggar looked up and nodded. The boy stepped forward, held out the offering. "My mother told me to give you this," he said. The beggar received it with both hands, bowing gently. "Thank you." The boy lingered. "Can I ask you something?" He smiled. "Of course. Why don't you talk much?" The beggar tilted his head slightly, as if considering the question carefully. Then he said, "Because silence sometimes teaches more than speaking." The boy sat down beside him. "But don't you get bored? Alone all the time?" "Alone is not always lonely," he replied. "It can be a space to listen, to learn what the heart is really saying." The boy looked thoughtful. "I don't think I've ever been alone. There's always something. My brothers, the animals, the work." He nodded. "Then one day try sitting by yourself, not to do anything, just to be." The boy frowned. "What if I don't like what I feel?" "That," the beggar said gently, "is where the learning begins." The boy picked up a small twig and traced patterns in the dirt. "Were you always like this?" The beggar chuckled softly. "No. I once thought silence meant failure. That stillness meant nothing was happening, but I was wrong." He held up the bowl. "This bowl used to frighten me. I feared it would always be empty, that it proved I had nothing. But the Buddha showed me emptiness is a kind of space. It's not the absence of meaning, it's the room for meaning to enter." The boy stared at the bowl. "It's just a bowl." "Yes," the beggar nodded. "And also, it's everything." The boy grinned. "That doesn't make sense." The beggar smiled. "Most truths don't at first, but they grow in you like seeds." They sat for a while without words. The boy eventually stood up, brushing the dust from his tunic. "Will you be here tomorrow?" he asked. "Yes." "Will you teach me something else?" "I won't teach," the beggar said. "But if you sit with me, you may hear something that isn't spoken." The boy nodded, and without saying goodbye, turned and ran back toward the houses. His small feet kicked up soft clouds of dust, but his presence left something behind. A warmth, a thread, a beginning. The beggar looked once more at the rice cake in his hands. He did not eat it right away. He held it, feeling its shape, its weight, its intention. Then slowly he unwrapped it, bowed his head, and offered a silent blessing, not just for the food, but for the giver. In stillness, gratitude is loud. The afternoon sun filtered gently through the tamarind leaves, casting shifting patterns on the ground where the beggar sat. His posture was relaxed, his breath even, his eyes soft and unfocused. Time passed like a lazy river, unhurried, unbothered. He had eaten the rice cake with quiet appreciation, not for the taste, but for the intention behind it. In every bite, he had felt the boy's curiosity, his courage, his wish to understand something deeper than a routine act of kindness. And now, as the shadows stretched longer, the beggar found himself thinking, not with the mind that reasons, but with the heart that remembers. He had once lived with constant restlessness, always wondering what tomorrow might bring, always feeling that something was missing, that somewhere else must hold the answers. His feet had wandered from village to village, not in search of food, but in search of peace. And yet, peace had never arrived when he chased it. It had come only now when he stopped chasing. A gentle breeze stirred the air, and with it came the sound of footsteps, slow, hesitant. He turned his head slightly and saw an older woman approaching, her hands folded at her chest. She wore simple clothes and walked with the careful steps of someone who had carried many burdens over many years. She stopped a few paces away. "May I sit?" He nodded silently. She lowered herself to the earth with effort, knees cracking softly as she settled. They sat in silence for a long moment. Then she said, "I've seen you many times. Always quiet, always still. I used to think you were lost." He looked at her gently. "And now?" "I'm not sure," she said. "I think maybe I'm the one who's lost." There was no pity in his eyes, only listening. She continued, "My children have grown. My hands no longer have work. I used to wake up with purpose. Now I just wake." The beggar nodded slowly. "That is a kind of pain many carry. When the world no longer asks for your strength, you begin to wonder who you are without it." She looked at him, eyes moist. "Yes," he gestured toward the bowl beside him. "I once believed I was only as worthy as what others gave me, that if the bowl was full, I mattered. If not, I was invisible. She tilted her head. And now? He smiled softly. Now I understand. The bowl is always full if I'm not trying to measure it. She blinked. I don't think I understand. That's all right, he said. Let it settle, like tea leaves in water. Sometimes meaning needs stillness to become clear. She looked down at her hands. I've always been doing something. I don't know how to just be. Then start small, he said. Sit, breathe, feel your heartbeat. You don't need a title. You don't need a role. You just need presence. She nodded slowly. It sounds simple, but it's hard. He looked toward the horizon. Everything important is simple, and everything simple takes time. The wind passed between them like an old friend. They did not speak for a while. There was no need. Sometimes the most healing words are the ones never said. Eventually she stood and placed a small cloth-wrapped bundle next to his bowl. For tomorrow, she said, or whenever. He bowed his head. Thank you. She turned and walked away, lighter somehow. He did not unwrap the bundle. Not yet. He simply sat. And in that sitting, in that gentle silence, a truth unfolded like a flower in morning sun. You don't have to be needed to be whole. You only have to be present. The sun drifted lower in the sky, its golden rays softening into amber hues that kissed the treetops and rooftops alike. The village began to slow, as it always did in the late hours. Voices lowered, footsteps faded, and even the animals seemed to move with more tenderness. The beggar remained beneath the tamarind tree, his bowl beside him, the cloth-wrapped bundle still unopened. He traced the rim of the bowl with his fingers slowly, thoughtfully. It was chipped in places, stained by years of weather and wear, and yet it had never broken, much like himself. He remembered once being ashamed of its imperfections. He had once tried to clean it so furiously that the outer glaze faded. He had wanted it to appear newer, better, as if its worth could be increased by looking less used. But now he saw the cracks as memories, the stains as stories, the shape as honest. He whispered quietly, "This bowl has been through everything with me, and never asked to be anything other than what it is." A bird landed on a nearby branch, hopping twice before settling. Its feathers were not bright, its song was not loud, but it sang anyway. For no one, for everyone. The beggar smiled. He reached for the bundle and slowly unwrapped it. Inside was a small handful of sticky rice, a piece of dried mango, and a note written in delicate, trembling lines. "You reminded me that I am not useless." He held the note for a long time. The woman's words warmed him more than the food. Not because of praise, but because they reflected something deeper, that his silence had created space for someone else to see their own light. He folded the note carefully and placed it inside the bowl. Then he ate, slowly, thankfully, as if each bite was a prayer. When he finished, he wiped the bowl clean with the cloth and returned it gently to his side. He did not need more. Not today. The sky deepened into a rich blue, and stars began to appear, one by one, like truths waiting patiently to be seen. He lay back on the earth and watched them, no longer searching the sky for signs or symbols, just noticing, just being. Then softly, a thought entered his heart. You are not broken because you are quiet. You are not invisible because you are still. You are not empty because you carry nothing. In the hush of twilight, with the bowl by his side and the earth beneath him, he closed his eyes and slept as though he belonged. The night passed gently, as if the stars themselves were guardians standing watch over all that stirred in sleep. The wind was calm, the forest quiet, and the village behind him seemed to sigh in unison with the dark. When the beggar opened his eyes in the pale morning light, he did not rise immediately. He lay still, listening not for sounds, but for presence. There was peace in knowing that nothing urgent awaited him. There were no tasks, no expectations, just breath, just this moment. He eventually sat up, brushing away a few leaves that had gathered on his robe. The bowl resting beside him had caught the first light of dawn and now glowed faintly, as though it too had slept well. He looked into it, not seeking, not hoping, simply seeing. And in that seeing, something inside him softened once more. There was a time when emptiness had frightened him. It had felt like failure. It had meant rejection, invisibility, worthlessness. But now, emptiness felt like space, like openness, like possibility. He whispered to the bowl as if to a companion, "You don't need to hold anything to have meaning." He lifted the bowl in both hands, not as a request, but as a gesture of offering, to the sky, to the earth, to the day itself. And then he rose. His walk toward the village was slow but steady. He noticed more now, the shimmer of dew on grass, the lazy flutter of a butterfly, the creak of a wooden cart being pulled by an old ox. Life was always unfolding. The difference was that now he was awake to it. At the edge of the village, a child approached. Not the boy from before, but a younger girl, perhaps 5 or 6, holding a small plum in her hands. Her eyes were wide and curious. She reached up, placing the plum in the bowl with great care, as though the act itself were sacred. He bowed deeply. "Thank you, little one," she smiled. "Mama says when we give, it makes space in our hearts." He smiled back. "Your mama is very wise." She nodded seriously, then skipped away, her braids bouncing with each step. The beggar looked at the plum. Its skin was bruised, imperfect, but to him it was perfect in its intention. He sat again beneath the tamarind tree and held the fruit without eating it. He closed his eyes, letting the cool morning air fill his lungs. And then he thought, true giving does not diminish us. It reveals what we already have. He placed the plum gently on a clean cloth beside him. He would eat it later, not because he was saving it, but because he was savoring the moment that had given it. And for the first time he realized something beautiful. He had spent years thinking the bowl was a tool for survival, but now he understood. The bowl was not just for receiving, it was also for remembering. The morning unfolded with grace, each minute arriving like a soft petal drifting from an unseen blossom. The village was alive with its usual rhythm, voices calling across courtyards, the clink of pots being washed, the clatter of carts rolling over uneven stones. Yet amidst the movement, the beggar remained a still point under the tamarind tree, the bowl resting calmly at his side. He had not spoken since receiving the plum. There was no need. In silence, he had heard more than words could offer. In stillness, he had felt the teachings of life revealing themselves gently, layer by layer. The plum remained uneaten. Not because he was avoiding it, but because it had become more than food. It was a symbol now of giving, of trust, of the purity in a child's gesture. To eat it too quickly would be to forget the softness of that moment. So he waited. A soft voice interrupted his thoughts. "Do you always sit like this?" He turned his head. A young man, perhaps just past his 20s, stood nearby with a bundle of firewood slung over one shoulder. His tone was not mocking, just curious. The beggar smiled. "Only when I'm not walking." The man laughed lightly and stepped closer. "I've seen you here many times. You never ask for anything, yet people still give to you." "I receive what is freely offered," the beggar said. "Nothing more." The man sat down, setting the firewood beside him. "Don't you get tired of waiting? Of not knowing what the day will bring?" The beggar looked upward, following the trail of a drifting cloud. When you stop needing the day to bring something, it begins to offer everything. The young man frowned. "I don't understand." "You will," the beggar said gently. "Understanding doesn't always arrive through explanation. Sometimes it comes quietly, like sunlight warming your back without you noticing." The man pulled at the grass near his feet. "I work hard, I plan, I save, I build, but I'm still restless." "That's not failure," the beggar said. "It's the call to pause, to look inward." "I don't have time to pause." "You don't have time not to," the beggar replied, his tone never forceful. "Restlessness is often the soul knocking on the door you've forgotten to open." The young man sat in silence, watching the way the breeze stirred the leaves above them. After a while, he said, "You speak in riddles." "I speak in images," the beggar corrected softly. "Because the heart doesn't speak in facts, it speaks in feeling." The man stood, brushing the dust from his hands. "Maybe one day I'll understand." The beggar nodded. "You already are." He watched the young man walk away, his steps slower than when he had arrived. The beggar turned his attention back to the plum. He lifted it carefully, turned it in his hand, and took a small bite. Sweet, a little tart, completely real. He chewed slowly, honoring not just the fruit, but the journey it had taken, from tree to child, to bowl to this moment. Another thought came, soft and sure. The world is not here to fill us. It is here to awaken us. He finished the fruit, wiped his fingers clean, and returned the bowl to his side. And once again he sat, whole, quiet, open. The sun had now risen to its gentle height in the sky, casting a soft glow that neither scorched nor dimmed. It was the kind of warmth that wrapped itself around the skin like a comforting shawl, not asking for anything, simply offering its presence. The beggar remained beneath the tamarind tree, unmoved by time, yet deeply moved by being. He was not waiting. He was not expecting. He was simply available to life, to breath, to the unfolding of the moment. A familiar sound reached his ears. The light, quick footsteps of the little girl who had given him the plum. She appeared again, her cheeks flushed from running, her hands cupped around something small. "I found you," she beamed, as though this were a game and he was the prize. He smiled. "Yes, here I am." She opened her hand slowly, revealing a tiny white flower freshly picked, its petals still trembling from the movement. "I brought this for you." He received it with both hands, treating it as if she had handed him the most precious gem. "Thank you." She sat beside him again, knees folded, face turned toward him with eager curiosity. "Do you ever get bored sitting here?" He shook his head gently. "No." "Why not?" "Because even when nothing changes, everything is always becoming." She wrinkled her nose. "That sounds like a puzzle," he chuckled. "It means I've learned to see the small things, how a leaf turns slightly in the wind, how the shadow of a branch shifts with the sun. If you really watch, nothing stays the same." She looked around and whispered, "Like the way the ants walk in different lines every day?" "Exactly," he smiled. "Even they are little teachers." She fell silent for a moment, then asked, "What do you do when you're sad?" The question touched something deep within him. He held up the flower between his fingers, looked at it softly. "When I'm sad, I sit with my sadness the same way I sit with this flower. I hold it gently. I don't crush it or throw it away. I let it be here, with me." "Even if it hurts?" "Yes, especially then." She looked down at her lap. "I cried last night. My brother yelled at me." "And did you tell your sadness it was allowed to stay a while?" She looked up, surprised. "No, I told it to go away." He nodded slowly. "Sometimes sadness doesn't leave because we're too busy pushing it, but if you sit beside it like a friend, it eventually gets tired and rests." She reached out and touched the flower in his hand. "It's small, but it's pretty. Just like your sadness," he said gently. "It's not here to hurt you. It's here to teach you something." "What does it teach?" "That your heart is still soft, that you still care." She was quiet for a long time after that. When she finally stood to leave, she didn't say goodbye. She only touched the rim of his bowl with her fingers, as if in thanks, and walked away slowly, her little feet brushing the dust like whispers. The beggar remained seated, flower in hand, bowl by his side, and from the stillness of the moment, a truth unfolded like morning light. We do not need to chase away sadness. We need to welcome it like a quiet guest and listen to what it's come to say. The day wore on, gently and without weight. The sun was no longer climbing, but gliding, its light softening as if it too was learning to let go. The village behind the beggar continued its rhythm, voices rising and falling like waves, the scent of cooking rice drifting faintly through the trees, and footsteps moving to unseen tasks. The beggar remained beneath the tamarind tree, the small white flower resting in the curve of his bowl. It had begun to wilt, but he did not mind. Nothing stays fresh forever. Even beauty, he had learned, is not meant to be held too tightly. He reached out and picked up the flower gently, observing how its petals now curled at the edges, its stem bending slightly. Still delicate, still beautiful, just in a different way. He whispered, "You're not less just because you're fading." And then, as if in response, a voice spoke nearby. "You talk to things that don't talk back." It was the young man with the firewood, returning again. This time, he carried nothing in his hands, only questions in his eyes. The beggar smiled. "Most things do talk back. We just forget how to listen." The young man sat down beside him, less restless now. "I've been thinking about what you said, about restlessness being a door." The beggar nodded. "And?" "I think I've been knocking for years without realizing I was holding the key." He turned to face the beggar. "But I'm afraid. If I stop running, I'm afraid I'll fall apart." The beggar looked at him with kindness. "Then fall apart, gently, and see what is still there when the pieces settle." The young man was silent for a while. Then he asked, "How did you learn to be so calm?" The beggar looked down at the bowl, the flower, the dust beneath his feet. "By not being calm," he said quietly. "For a long time. By feeling everything, anger, hunger, grief. By making mistakes. by sitting with my shame until it softened, by watching the world move without me and realizing I didn't need to catch up. The young man exhaled. That sounds hard. It was, the beggar nodded, but it was also the only way to meet myself. The young man leaned back, resting his head against the tree trunk. I want that. Peace, I mean. You don't have to want it, the beggar said gently. You just have to stop pushing it away. The young man looked up at the sky, where the first hints of golden evening began to stretch across the blue. Maybe I'll come sit with you again tomorrow, he said. I'll be here, the beggar replied. Even if I'm not. The young man frowned. What does that mean? You'll see, the beggar smiled. As the young man rose and walked away, slower, quieter than before, the beggar picked up the flower once more. Its petals trembled slightly in the breeze. He placed it back into the bowl and closed his eyes. Another thought bloomed, soft as a whisper. Peace doesn't arrive when everything is perfect. Peace arrives when we stop needing things to be. Evening settled like a sigh, gentle and complete. The sky stretched into deeper shades of blue, threaded with streaks of rose and amber, fading into the promise of night. The village sounds softened, doors creaked closed, children's laughter faded into murmurs, and the clang of pots gave way to the low hush of shared meals. The beggar sat alone beneath the tamarind tree, the light in his eyes reflecting the changing sky. He watched without needing to hold on to anything, each moment arriving and dissolving like breath. The flower in the bowl had begun to curl further, its edges browned by time, and yet he looked at it with the same gentleness he had shown it that morning. Nothing stays, but everything matters. From the path beyond the well, a figure approached. The boy from the earlier days, the one who had asked why he never spoke, why he kept showing up. He walked slower now, no longer out of caution but out of care. In his hands was a small jar, wrapped in cloth and tied with a piece of twine. He stopped before the beggar and offered it wordlessly. The beggar accepted it with a slight bow. What is this? The boy shrugged. Just some tea. My mother made it. She said you'd understand the kind that helps people sleep. The beggar smiled. I understand. Thank you. The boy sat down beside him, crossing his legs. They watched the sky for a while, neither in a hurry to speak. Finally, the boy asked, Do you think people ever stop needing things? The beggar turned the jar slowly in his hands, watching how the glass caught the light. We never stop needing, but we can stop confusing our wants with our wounds. The boy looked puzzled. What does that mean? It means, the beggar said softly, that sometimes we think we need more food, more praise, more things, but what we really need is to be seen, to be held, to be heard. The boy nodded slowly. Like how I used to get angry when my brother ignored me. I thought I needed his toy, but really I just wanted him to play with me. Exactly, the beggar said. Beneath most of our wanting is just a longing to feel connected. The boy ran a finger along the rim of the bowl. But it's empty again. The beggar smiled, only in one way, but it's full in another. The boy tilted his head. Full of what? Moments, the beggar replied. Kindness, listening, stillness, everything we share today. Your question, your gift, even this silence. It all lives here now. The boy looked at the bowl as if seeing it for the first time. I never thought an empty bowl could hold so much. The beggar's eyes crinkled gently. Neither did I, until I stopped looking for food and started noticing what was already here. The boy lay back on the grass, arms behind his head. I think I like being quiet with you. I like being quiet with you too. The stars began to appear, one by one, as if the sky itself was remembering something important. The beggar placed the jar of tea beside him, untouched for now. And as the night deepened, a thought formed gently in his heart. The deepest fullness is not what we hold in our hands, but what we hold in our presence. The stars shimmered gently above, not with urgency, but with quiet patience. The sky was deep now, ink dark and vast, as if inviting all who looked upward to rest in its openness. The village had grown still. Lamps glowed faintly behind shuttered windows, casting soft halos of amber light against the dusted paths. Beneath the tamarind tree, the beggar remained awake. Not restless, only awake. His eyes were open, but his heart was where his attention rested. The bowl sat in front of him, cradling the wilted flower and the folded note. Next to it, the jar of tea. He hadn't yet opened it. There was something sacred about waiting, not out of hesitation, but out of respect. Some offerings were meant to be held longer before being received. The night air cooled slightly. A faint breeze moved through the leaves above, and with it came the sound of another's presence, light steps, careful and deliberate. A figure emerged from the shadows. It was the older woman again, the one who had once said she felt lost after her children had grown. She approached slowly, holding something small wrapped in cloth. "You're still here," she said softly, as if surprised. "I am," he replied. She sat beside him without asking this time. She placed the cloth-wrapped item in his hands. "Another gift. It's not much, just some sesame sweets I used to make for my children." He nodded with gratitude. "Thank you." She looked out toward the darkened village. "It's strange, I used to be needed. Every hour someone wanted something. Now the house is quiet, and I don't know what to do with myself." He unwrapped the sweets slowly, revealing small, round treats, fragrant, familiar. "And yet, you made these." She looked down. "Old habits. Or perhaps a new kind of giving," he said. "One not born of duty, but of love freely offered." She was quiet. Then, in a voice barely audible, she said, "Sometimes I wonder, if no one needs me anymore, do I still matter?" He broke a piece of sweet and held it gently. "A river doesn't matter less just because no one is drinking from it." She looked at him, eyes wide. "But it used to have purpose. And now," he said kindly, "it has peace. And the peace it offers the world may be deeper than its usefulness." She took a slow breath. "I never thought of it that way." He placed one of the sweets in the bowl beside the flower and note. "If this bowl is never filled with food alone, it holds gestures, memories, moments that remind us we are still giving something of ourselves, even in stillness." She leaned back, staring up at the stars. "I used to think stillness meant the end, but maybe it's just a different kind of beginning." He smiled. "Beginnings don't always come with fanfare. Sometimes they arrive as quiet invitations to see ourselves differently." They sat together for a long time, not speaking, the sesame sweets between them, the bowl open and calm. And when she finally rose to go, she said only, "Thank you for making space for me." He bowed his head. It's what the bowl teaches. When we stop trying to fill it, we begin to see how full it already is. She walked into the night, shoulders lighter, and the beggar, now alone again, looked down at the bowl and thought, "We are not only valuable when we are needed, we are valuable when we are present." The night deepened, cloaking the earth in layers of velvet blue. The stars glowed brighter now, no longer competing with the fading light of day. The moon, round and serene, had risen high above the tamarind tree, casting soft silver shadows that danced gently across the ground. The beggar remained seated in silence, the bowl before him holding not food but offerings of another kind, memory, presence, kindness. A flower now curled in sleep, a sweet broken in half, a folded note like a secret prayer, and still beside it the jar of tea, untouched but not forgotten. He reached for the jar and untied the twine slowly. The lid came off with a soft pop, and the scent of jasmine rose gently into the night air. He inhaled deeply, letting the aroma settle into him. Not just the fragrance, but everything behind it, the small hands that had carried it, the intention, the trust. He poured a little into the lid and drank. Warmth spread through his chest, not just from the tea, but from the meaning it carried. Then he closed his eyes and whispered, "To be given something without asking is to be seen." He placed the jar back beside the bowl. Moments passed, or perhaps they stretched into something timeless. From the distance, footsteps again, this time slower. He opened his eyes and saw the boy, the one who had first asked him why he carried the bowl when it was always empty. The boy sat down without a word, curling his legs beneath him. They sat together in silence for a while, the stars blinking gently above them like curious eyes. Then the boy asked, "How do you know what's enough?" The beggar turned toward him. "Enough of what?" "Of anything," the boy replied. "Food, talking, giving, wanting." The beggar was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "Enough is when the longing becomes soft, when it no longer burns or pulls, but simply rests beside you." The boy frowned. "So I won't feel full, just not empty?" The beggar smiled. "You'll feel peaceful, and that is deeper than full." The boy looked down at the bowl. "I used to think you were waiting for someone to come fill it. Now I think maybe it's already full, and people come just to sit beside it." The beggar looked at him kindly. "That's a wise thing to see." The boy picked up a sesame sweet and took a bite. This is really good. The beggar nodded. Made by someone who thought they had nothing left to give. The boy chewed thoughtfully. Everyone thinks they're empty. The beggar sipped the tea, and everyone is filled with something they've forgotten how to see. They sat together in the soft quiet, the night wrapping around them like a warm shawl. The beggar placed the tea lid back in place, then gently held the bowl with both hands, as if cradling all the invisible things inside it. Trust, sorrow, kindness, truth. And in that stillness, a new understanding bloomed like a lotus in moonlight. Enough is not a number. It is the moment you stop reaching and start receiving what is already here. The moon drifted across the sky, steady and glowing, like a silent guardian watching over those who dared to be still. The air had cooled, the kind of cool that wrapped around the skin softly, reminding the body it was alive. The beggar and the boy sat beneath the tamarind tree, side by side, their shadows long and quiet. No words passed between them for a while. The boy leaned gently against the trunk, eyes lifted to the stars, mouth still sweet from the sesame tree. The beggar, bowl in hand, ran his fingers gently along its rim as though tracing the circle of something eternal. Finally, the boy spoke, his voice slow and thoughtful. Sometimes, I want things I don't even understand. The beggar turned toward him slightly. That is the nature of longing. It rises from places we haven't yet explored. But it feels so real, the boy continued. Like if I don't get what I want, I'll break. The beggar nodded slowly. That is how desire tricks the heart. It dresses itself as a need, when really it is often a memory reaching out, asking to be healed. The boy sat up straighter, like, when I want someone to notice me? Yes, the beggar replied. Sometimes what you truly want is not the attention, but the feeling of being seen, being valued. The boy hugged his knees. How do I stop it? You don't stop it, the beggar said gently. You meet it. You ask it what it really wants. And then you listen. The boy looked confused. Listen to what? Listen to your heart without arguing, the beggar said. Desire becomes softer when it's heard. Not fed, not silenced, just heard. The wind rustled the leaves gently above them, a quiet applause from the trees. The boy looked at the bowl again. It's funny, the bowl is so quiet, but it teaches so much, the beggar smiled, because it doesn't try to teach, it only holds. The boy blinked slowly. Like how I should hold myself when I feel too much. The beggar nodded. Exactly. Not every storm needs to be stopped. Some just need space to pass. They sat in silence again. The boy's breathing grew slower, his eyelids heavier. He leaned slightly toward the beggar unconsciously, like a flower leaning toward light. The beggar remained still, a silent presence. He did not move, did not speak, only held the moment like he held the bowl, in both hands, with care, without clinging. The stars above them glimmered softly as if smiling. And in the hush of that sacred night, one more truth unfolded gently in the beggar's heart. When we stop longing and start listening to it, it leads us not to more, but to enough. The night had ripened into its quietest hour, when even the wind moved like a whisper and time itself seemed to pause. The sky was deep and vast, a gentle ocean of stars above the earth that slumbered below. Beneath the tamarind tree, the beggar sat in silence, the boy's head resting lightly against his side, breath slow and steady, surrendered to sleep. The beggar did not move. He remained as still as the bowl in his lap, his hands resting upon it as though it were not an object, but a part of him, a vessel not just of offerings, but of understanding. He gazed down at the boy, a soft smile forming at the edge of his lips. So much longing, so many questions, and yet now, in rest, the boy was peaceful. Not because he had found all the answers, but because he had stopped asking for a while. This is what we forget, the beggar thought. That peace isn't always given by what we find. Sometimes it arrives the moment we stop searching. He looked up at the stars, their light, ancient and gentle. He remembered his own childhood, a time long past when he too had asked the world to give him something that would quiet the ache inside. He had wandered far, he had begged, he had cried. He had filled the bowl and emptied it 1,000 times, and still the ache had remained. Until the day he stopped asking the world to fill the bowl and started offering the bowl to the moment. That was when the ache had changed, not disappeared, but softened, as if it had been waiting all along not to be solved, but simply to be seen. A thought stirred within him, not heavy like a lesson, but light like morning dew. The ache in our heart is not weakness. It is the doorway to tenderness, and tenderness is the beginning of wisdom. He exhaled slowly, letting the breath leave him like a feather on still air. The boy shifted in his sleep but did not wake. The beggar did not try to guide his dreams. He simply remained, a presence beside the child, knowing that sometimes what we offer others is not our words, not our wisdom, but our stillness. And the bowl, resting gently in his lap, seemed to glow in the faint light of the stars, holding nothing and everything. Dawn was still a distant promise on the horizon, but the deep quiet of night had begun to lift, just barely. A faint coolness touched the leaves. The stars, though still visible, seemed to blink slower, as if preparing to retreat. The world was between moments, no longer the fullness of night, not yet the breath of morning. The boy stirred beside the beggar, his body adjusting in sleep, but his mind not yet waking. The beggar remained still, not out of obligation, but because presence is sometimes the highest form of care. He watched the rhythm of the boy's breath, steady and light, as if his dreams had found a soft place to rest. He looked down at the bowl once more. It had not changed, but he had. He gently lifted it, turning it slightly in his palms. The flower, now dry and fragile, still lay curled inside. The sesame sweet, now halved, was untouched since the last night. The note, folded neatly, had remained where he placed it. And yet, none of these things felt old. Each was still alive, still glowing with the moment it had been given. He realized something then. The bowl had become more than a companion. It had become a mirror. It held not just what others gave, but what he chose to see. He remembered how long ago he had stared into its emptiness with resentment, anger, and shame. How he had believed its lack reflected his own. How he had wandered from town to town, chasing the next filling, the next kindness, the next drop of meaning. But now, after so many days beneath this tree, so many moments of stillness shared with strangers in silence, he finally understood. The bowl was never waiting to be filled. It was teaching him how to hold what couldn't be seen. He placed the bowl back on the earth gently, almost reverently. The boy stirred again, blinking his eyes open. He looked up at the beggar and smiled sleepily. "Did I fall asleep?" "You did," the beggar said softly. The boy sat up slowly, rubbing his eyes. "I had a dream." "What did you see?" "I was walking through a garden, but I wasn't looking for anything. I was just walking, and everything felt enough." The beggar nodded. "That is a good dream." The boy looked at the bowl. "Is it still empty?" The beggar smiled. "That depends on how you look." The boy tilted his head. "How do you look at something that isn't there?" The beggar's voice was gentle. "By seeing what it's holding, not with your eyes, but with your heart." The boy touched the rim of the bowl and closed his eyes for a moment. Then he opened them and said, "It's not empty at all." "No," the beggar whispered. "It never was." They sat quietly as the first faint lines of light began to trace the sky, and in the hush before sunrise, one more truth rose gently within the beggar's heart. The emptiness we fear is often the space where grace has been quietly waiting. The first light of dawn spilled gently across the sky, not in a rush, but with reverence, like a curtain slowly lifting to reveal a sacred stage. The stars had faded into the soft blush of morning, and the trees stirred lightly as if waking from a long, peaceful dream. The village beyond the trees was still hushed, caught in that brief and holy pause before the day begins. The boy and the beggar sat side by side, quiet as the sky changed color. No words passed between them. They didn't need to. Sometimes when hearts are open, silence says everything. The beggar reached down and lifted the bowl into his lap once more. The dry flower crumbled slightly as he moved it. A few petals fell, weightless as memory. He did not brush them away. The boy watched. "Are you sad the flower is gone?" The beggar smiled. "No, it gave everything it had, and now it teaches in another way." The boy leaned in. "What can something broken teach?" "That beauty is not in lasting forever," the beggar said. "It's in being fully here while you last." The boy looked thoughtful. "Like how a song ends but you still remember it." "Exactly," the beggar nodded. "And sometimes you understand it more after the sound is gone." The boy looked into the bowl again. "So this bowl, it doesn't need to be full of things? It only needs to be open," the beggar said softly. "Open to receive, open to give, open to let go. The boy traced a finger along the rim. Why does that feel hard sometimes? Because we are taught to hold tight, the beggar replied. We cling to things, moments, people, praise, thinking they make us whole. But clinging doesn't bring peace. It brings fear, fear of loss. The boy was quiet, then said, "But if I don't hold tight, won't I lose everything?" The beggar looked at him with warmth. You will lose, that is true, but letting go allows you to carry what matters more lightly. It makes room for new things to come, things you didn't even know were waiting. A soft breeze passed between them. A bird called in the distance. Somewhere in the village, a door creaked open. The boy whispered, "So, the bowl is really about trust?" "Yes," the beggar said. "Trust in the unfolding. Trust in the moment. Trust that you are already enough, even if the bowl is empty." The boy breathed in slowly, as if trying to hold the whole morning in his lungs. And the beggar placed the bowl back on the earth, empty and full, all at once. As the first golden rays of sunlight touched the rim, the beggar closed his eyes. And in that warmth, a truth arose like a quiet sunrise in the heart. Letting go is not losing. It is the art of making space for the miracle of now. The village had awakened. Soft footsteps moved across packed earth. Doors opened. Smoke curled from cooking fires, carrying the scent of rice and herbs into the air. Life resumed its rhythm, gentle, unspoken, inevitable. The boy stood beside the beggar, his eyes still lingering on the bowl as villagers began to pass by. Some nodded in recognition. A few offered small bundles of food. One woman holding a sleeping infant paused long enough to smile, not in pity, but in respect. The beggar received each gesture with the same calm, the same quiet bow. He placed the offerings in the bowl without judgment, without expectation. Some were generous, some meager, yet all were accepted with equal grace. The boy watched closely. "How do you never seem disappointed?" The beggar turned to him. "Because I stopped measuring what I receive by the size of my need." The boy frowned. "But sometimes people don't give you anything at all." The beggar nodded. That is a kind of offering." The boy looked confused. "How?" The beggar gestured to the empty space in the bowl. "When someone walks by without giving, they give me a moment to practice letting go, to remember that I am not owed anything. That kindness is not a transaction." The boy's eyes widened. "So even nothing can teach something?" The beggar smiled. "Especially nothing. Emptiness is the beginning of most wisdom." A merchant passed, dropping a handful of dates into the bowl. The boy glanced at the offering, then looked back at the beggar. "Do you ever wish for more?" "I used to," the beggar said. "But wishing was a hunger that never ended. Gratitude, on the other hand, it fills you without needing more." The boy nodded slowly, letting the thought settle. Then softly he asked, "Will you ever stop carrying the bowl?" The beggar looked down at it, fingertips gently brushing the rim. "Maybe, but not yet. Not because I need what it brings, but because it helps others see what they have to offer." He looked at the boy. "And sometimes it helps them see what they carry within themselves." The boy was quiet. Then he said, "I think maybe one day I'll carry a bowl too." The beggar's smile was warm. "Then carry it with gentleness. Not to take, but to receive. Not to prove, but to remember." They sat again, side by side, as morning grew brighter around them, and as the bowl held the day's small gifts, a fig, a sweet, a folded leaf, the beggar felt a thought rise in his chest like breath. What we carry is never just for us. Sometimes we carry it so others can remember how to offer. The sun rose higher, washing the village in soft light, warming rooftops and treetops alike. Life was now in motion. Voices mingling in the air, animals rustling through narrow paths, morning routines unfolding in their familiar rhythm. But just beyond the edge of this quiet bustle, beneath the tamarind tree, the beggar sat with the boy, and time moved differently. The bowl, now containing a few humble offerings, rested in the beggar's lap. The boy sat close, his curiosity not yet satisfied. He didn't speak right away. He just watched, the way the beggar placed each item into the bowl with care, the way his hands moved slowly, as if honoring something invisible. Eventually, the boy asked, "Why do you take even the smallest things like they're precious?" The beggar looked at him with soft eyes. "Because they are. But it's just a piece of fruit, or some rice." The beggar held up a grain of rice between two fingers. This grain was planted by hands, grown by sun and rain, harvested with sweat and given freely. Inside something small, there is often something vast. The boy blinked. I never thought about it that way. Most people don't, the beggar said. We're taught to look for what's big, loud, impressive, but life hides its treasures in what's small, quiet, and easily missed. The boy lowered his voice as if matching the moment. Like this tree? The beggar smiled. Yes. How many people walk past it without ever noticing its shade, its roots, its patience? They sat in silence again, listening to the leaves rustling overhead, the faint chirp of birds returning to their branches, the rhythm of a world that never stopped teaching. The boy leaned back, resting his head against the tree. I think I'd like to live like this, to notice things. You already are, the beggar said, but I still forget. We all do, the beggar replied gently. That's why we return to stillness, not to escape life, but to remember how to live it. The boy closed his eyes for a moment. Then, as if remembering something important, he said, At home, everything is fast. People are always hurrying. Even when we eat, it feels like no one's really there. The beggar nodded. Speed isn't the problem. Forgetting to be present is. The boy opened his eyes. Is that what the bowl helps you do? It reminds me, the beggar said, that life is not what fills the bowl, but how we receive it. The boy sat quietly with that, and as the morning light dappled through the leaves above, another simple truth settled in the space between them. Peace begins not when we find more, but when we begin to notice what is already here. The day moved forward, unhurried. Shadows shifted gently beneath the trees, and the sun filtered through the tamarind leaves like golden threads stitched across the earth. Around them, life continued. Footsteps in the distance, the rhythm of sweeping brooms, the soft murmur of conversations rising and falling like waves. The beggar and the boy remained beneath the tree, still and quiet. The bowl now held several small gifts, a piece of fruit, a folded leaf, a sweet wrapped in cloth. But more than what the eye could see, it held the invisible offerings of the day, presence, kindness, listening, and learning. A soft voice broke the silence. It was the same older woman from before, walking slowly toward them, this time carrying nothing in her hands. I brought no gift today, she said gently, almost apologetically. The beggar looked up and smiled. Your presence is already won. She sat beside them, folding her hands in her lap. I used to think that if I wasn't giving or doing something, I was of no use. The beggar nodded. That belief is heavy. Many carry it. She looked down at the bowl. But you just sit, and people come. I sit, he said softly, so others may feel the space to arrive as they are. She considered that. And that's enough? It is, he replied, because stillness is not absence, it's invitation. The boy, listening closely, asked, but what if someone never brings anything? What if they only come to sit? The beggar looked at him. Then they bring their truth, and sometimes that is the most generous thing of all. The woman breathed in slowly. I never knew stillness could be shared. It's the first thing we ever shared, the beggar said, even before words. They fell into a quiet together, not awkward or empty, but peaceful. 3 people of different ages and paths connected by the simple willingness to be fully here. After some time, the woman stood. I'll come again tomorrow, even if I have nothing. He looked at her kindly. Then come with your whole heart. That is more than enough. She smiled and walked away, her steps light, unburdened. The boy turned to the beggar. You said once the bowl is not just for food. I think now it's like a doorway. The beggar tilted his head. A doorway to what? The boy grinned. To everything we forget to feel. The beggar laughed softly, deeply. Then you've already seen more than most. As the sunlight flickered gently through the branches above, another quiet understanding rose in the beggar's heart. Sometimes the greatest gift is not what we bring, but the willingness to come as we are. The afternoon settled with a golden hush. Light spilled lazily through the tamarind leaves, casting soft shadows that swayed gently with the breeze. The world seemed to breathe slower, as if even the sun had paused to rest. The beggar sat with the boy beneath the tree, the bowl between them, still cradling the quiet offerings of the day. Nothing new had been placed inside for some time, and yet the bowl felt fuller than ever. The boy leaned back, his eyes half closed. It's strange, he said. I thought a day without doing anything would feel boring, but it doesn't. The beggar looked at him. Why do you think that is? The boy thought for a moment. Maybe because I'm not trying to make the day do anything. The beggar smiled. Yes, that's the difference between passing time and receiving it. The boy picked up a leaf from the ground and twirled it between his fingers. Everyone's always doing something, chopping wood, washing clothes, running errands. But here it feels like enough just to sit. The beggar nodded. Sitting is not nothing. When done with awareness, it is a return to breath, to being, to the simple truth that you're already here. The boy looked down at the bowl. So it's kind of like the bowl. It doesn't move, but it's always ready. The beggar's gaze softened. Yes, the bowl teaches that openness doesn't require action, just presence. A bird landed nearby, hopping twice before stilling, its head tilted, watching them curiously. The boy whispered, "Do you ever get lonely?" The beggar paused before answering. "I used to, when I believed I needed others to fill something inside me. But now, when I'm alone, I listen, and in listening, I feel connected to everything." The boy nodded slowly, like the wind and the trees and this bird. "Yes," the beggar said. "Loneliness fades when we remember we are part of something larger, not because we control it, but because we belong to it." They sat in silence again, the kind that does not weigh but lifts. Then the boy said, "I think the world moves too fast to notice things like this." The beggar replied, "That's why we must choose sometimes to move slowly, not to escape the world, but to see it clearly." The boy placed the leaf gently into the bowl, next to the flower and the folded note. "For remembering," he said. The beggar looked at him, heart full. That's the finest reason of all. And as the wind stirred once more, carrying with it the quiet breath of trees, another truth unfolded like a whisper. The world does not always ask us to hurry. Sometimes it asks us to stop and notice that we are already home. The sun had begun its descent, casting long, soft shadows that stretched across the earth like silent stories. The warmth of the day remained, but it no longer pressed. It lingered, gentle, fading, complete. The beggar sat beneath the tamarind tree, his bowl resting between him and the boy, now joined again by the older woman. The three of them sat in quiet companionship, the kind that needed no introductions, no performances. Just being was enough. The woman gently placed a small scarf in the bowl, simple, well-worn, folded with care. "It's nothing special," she said softly. The beggar touched the cloth lightly. "That's never true." She smiled, a little shy. "I made it when I had more time, before I believed time needed to be filled with tasks." The boy looked at the scarf. "It's soft." The beggar nodded. "Softness is strength that chooses not to harden." The woman looked away, eyes distant. "I used to feel proud when people needed me, when they praised my work, my care. But when that stopped, I didn't know who I was anymore." The beggar listened without interrupting. "I thought," she continued, "that being useful was the only way to be worthy." The beggar looked into the bowl. "And now," she exhaled slowly, "now I'm starting to see that presence might be a kind of usefulness too." The boy chimed in. "You helped just by being here. You made this scarf. You sat with us. And I think that's more than enough." The woman's eyes shimmered. "Thank you." The beggar turned to her. "Sometimes the hardest kindness is the one we offer ourselves, the permission to be without proving anything." She nodded. "I'm learning." He gestured to the bowl. "This bowl does nothing but remain open, and yet look at what it holds." They all looked down. A flower, a note, a leaf, a scarf. Simple things. But together they were a quiet testament to connection, to memory, to offering, to healing without noise. The boy said, "I think this bowl is like a little temple." The beggar smiled. "Yes, not because of its shape, but because of what we choose to place inside it and how we do it." The light around them turned golden. Birds returned to their nests. Somewhere in the distance a bell rang, faint, clear, like truth spoken softly. And in the hush of that tender hour, the beggar felt another truth rise gently in his chest. You are not here to be useful. You are here to be whole. And in your wholeness, you will offer more than you ever imagined. The sun dipped lower behind the hills, bathing the village in a warm amber hue. The earth glowed softly, as though holding the memory of the day in its skin. Shadows stretched long and thin, and the air grew still, not heavy, but sacred, as if all things were preparing to bow before the night. Beneath the tamarind tree, the three remained, the beggar, the boy, the older woman. They had said little for some time. There was nothing urgent left to say. The bowl between them now held not only objects, but moments. Quiet moments, honest ones. Each small item, a scarf, a flower, a leaf, a sweet, a symbol of someone who had come and stayed and given something of their heart. A young girl approached from the path, timid but determined. She carried no gift, only wide eyes and a question hovering on her lips. "Can I sit?" she asked. The beggar nodded. She folded her legs beside the boy, who gave her a reassuring smile. The girl stared at the bowl. "Why do people put things in it?" The beggar looked at her. "Why do you think?" She was quiet for a while, then said, "Maybe to show they care." He smiled. "Yes, but not just to show others. Sometimes giving helps us see ourselves." She furrowed her brow. "How?" "When we give gently," the beggar said, "we learn we still have something to offer. And when we receive with openness, we remember that we are not alone." The girl nodded slowly. "I don't have anything with me." "That's all right," the woman said softly. "Neither did I at first." The girl glanced at the tree above them. Then with care she reached up and plucked a single leaf, small, bright, trembling slightly in her hand. She placed it in the bowl. The boy smiled. "That's a good leaf," she blushed. "It's all I had." The beggar looked at her with kind eyes. "And it's more than enough." The four of them sat quietly, the bowl between them now holding two leaves. The first, dry and curled, given in reflection. The second, fresh and green, given in courage. The woman said almost to herself, "It's strange how something so small can feel so full." The beggar nodded. "That's because the bowl doesn't measure size, it holds meaning." The girl looked up. "Will more people come?" "Maybe," the beggar said. "But even if no one else comes, this moment is already complete." The sky darkened a little more, streaked with pink and silver. A hush moved through the trees, and in that hush, a truth arose within the beggar's heart, quiet and whole. When we come together with nothing but sincerity, even an empty bowl becomes a sanctuary. The sky was now painted in deep lavender and dusky gold, the final brushstrokes of the day before it yielded fully to night. A gentle stillness wrapped around the village like a soft blanket. The breeze grew cooler, and the trees above the tamarind tree rustled softly, as if whispering blessings to those seated beneath. The beggar, the boy, the older woman, and the young girl remained gathered around the bowl. No one rushed to leave. Time no longer pressed. It simply breathed with them. From the distance came the sound of slow, steady steps. Another figure approached, a man with tired eyes and calloused hands. His clothes were worn, his shoulders sloped with the weight of many years. He stopped a few paces away. "Is this where people leave things?" he asked, voice cautious, almost embarrassed. The beggar met his eyes. "Only if they wish to." The man hesitated, then stepped forward and knelt. From his pocket, he pulled out a small, new, smooth stone, not polished, not remarkable, but carefully carried. "I've had this since I was a boy," he said quietly. "It reminded me of home, of simpler days." He placed it gently into the bowl. The girl looked at it and smiled. "It's shiny." The man nodded. "It used to feel like protection. I'd grip it in my hand when I was afraid. Now I think, maybe I don't need to hold it anymore." The beggar's voice was soft. Letting go doesn't mean forgetting. It means trusting that who you are now can carry what you once needed to hold. The man sat beside them, breathing deeply, as if releasing something invisible. The boy whispered, "I didn't know a rock could be a gift." The beggar replied, "Everything becomes sacred when given with sincerity." They all looked into the bowl. A dry leaf, a green leaf, a scarf, a sweet, a flower, a note, and now a small stone, heavy not in weight, but in meaning. The woman wiped her eyes. "Why does this feel like ceremony?" The beggar answered, "Because it is, not of tradition, but of presence." The girl leaned against the boy. The man rested his hands on his knees. The air grew cooler. A few fireflies danced near the edge of the clearing, glowing like thoughts that had yet to become words. No one spoke for a long time. They didn't need to. Then the beggar, with his eyes on the bowl, whispered a thought that rose like mist from the quiet center of his being. When many hearts meet in stillness, even the simplest gathering becomes a sacred offering. The first stars had begun to appear, delicate and faint, scattered like grains of salt across the deepening sky. Night approached slowly, but with certainty, and everything beneath it seemed to grow quieter. Not empty, but full of listening. Beneath the tamarind tree, 5 souls sat together. The beggar, the boy, the young girl, the older woman, and now the man with the stone. They sat not as strangers, nor as seekers, but as people who had simply allowed themselves to be here, to be human together. No one reached for the bowl anymore, but all eyes were drawn to it. It rested gently in the earth's curve, cradling the small, quiet tokens of the day. A note, a scarf, a sweet 2 leaves, a flower, a stone, and something invisible yet deeply present. The girl whispered, "Do you think it's full now?" The beggar looked at the bowl, then at her. "That depends on what you believe fullness is." The boy added, "I think it's full of stories." The man nodded. "And memory." The woman smiled. "And care," the beggar said softly. "Then perhaps it is overflowing." They all sat for a moment longer as the darkness wrapped gently around the village. A lantern flickered in the distance. A dog barked once, then fell quiet. Somewhere a mother sang a lullaby. The beggar reached out and placed both hands on either side of the bowl. He did not lift it. He simply held it, like one might hold a sleeping child, with care, with steadiness, with love. His voice was low and calm. "This bowl has never asked for more than what is freely given, and in doing so, it has received more than I ever expected." He looked up at those around him. "And so have I." The girl leaned forward. "Will we come back tomorrow?" The beggar smiled. "If your heart brings you, then yes." The boy looked at the stars. "What happens if no one comes?" The beggar turned his eyes upward too. "Then the sky will still be here, the tree will still give shade, the bowl will still be open, and I will still be sitting." The man closed his eyes. "That's enough," the woman whispered. "More than enough." And as the sky darkened fully, a wind moved through the leaves above them, gentle and warm, as if the world itself had exhaled. In that silence, the beggar felt one final truth rise softly, like moonlight. A bowl that is open is never truly empty. It gathers not just things, but the quiet miracle of hearts that choose to meet. Night had fully arrived, and with it, a velvet hush settled over the village and forest alike. The stars glowed with quiet confidence, ancient and unhurried, while the moon, soft and full, watched from above like a gentle witness to all that had unfolded beneath the tamarind tree. The group remained seated, though their words had faded. The girl rested her head on the older woman's shoulder. The boy leaned against the tree, legs stretched out in front of him. The man sat cross-legged, hands resting on his knees, and the beggar, ever still, sat with the bowl before him, both hands open in his lap. There was no need for conversation anymore. Everything that needed to be said had been lived. After a long, peaceful silence, the woman spoke, her voice soft as mist. "This feels like the kind of quiet that heals something I didn't know was hurting." The beggar nodded. "Because in silence, what's hidden finally has room to breathe." The man added, "Most days, I only hear noise, from work, from worries, from my own thoughts. But here, it's like even my thoughts are listening." The boy looked at the bowl. "Do you think everything we've put in it is still here, even if it's small?" The beggar answered, "Nothing given with sincerity ever disappears. It becomes part of what remains, even when the object is gone." The girl whispered, "Even the leaf I gave?" "Especially the leaf," the beggar smiled. "Because it was your first offering, and first offerings always echo the longest." They sat with those words, letting them settle into the quiet like candlelight warming a room. The wind moved through the branches above them, not as a chill, but as a blessing. Then slowly, the beggar lifted the bowl once more. Not high, not for display, just enough to honor it, to acknowledge what it had become. "It's no longer just a bowl," he said. "It's a remembrance of stillness, of presence, of each other." He gently placed it down again. The woman asked, "Will you always sit here?" The beggar looked out into the night. "As long as I am needed, and even when I'm not, this place will remember." The boy said, "I think I will too." The girl nodded. "Me too." The man didn't speak. He only placed his hand lightly on the edge of the bowl, just for a moment, a wordless thank you. The beggar closed his eyes, and in that space between heartbeats, a final thought bloomed within him, like a lotus in the dark. In a world always reaching for more, sometimes the most sacred thing we can do is sit, stay, and let what is be enough. The moon stood high now, casting its soft silver light over the quiet earth. The tamarind tree stretched above them like a guardian, its branches gently swaying as if bowing to the night. Every sound had softened, the rustling leaves, the distant crackle of fire from the village, the slow exhale of the wind through the grass. Even the silence had grown deeper, richer, like a well that had been patiently filled, drop by drop. One by one, those gathered beneath the tree began to rise. The girl stood first, lifting her gaze to the stars, then to the beggar. She did not speak, only offered a shy smile, the kind that blooms when words are no longer necessary. He nodded in return, a silent blessing. The boy rose next. He dusted his hands, then reached down and gently touched the rim of the bowl. "Thank you," he whispered, not just to the beggar, but to the moment. Then he walked slowly down the path, as if carrying something precious within him. The older woman took the girl's hand, her eyes full but without sorrow. She looked once more at the bowl, then at the beggar. "I thought I was empty," she said, "but now I feel spacious." The beggar replied, "Sometimes what feels like emptiness is really just the beginning of openness." She placed a hand over her heart, then followed the children into the night. The man lingered a little longer. He did not speak. He only bowed deeply, not in ritual, but in reverence. Then he too disappeared down the path, his footsteps soft, his shoulders somehow lighter. Now only the beggar remained. He looked down at the bowl one final time. It held the stone, the leaf, the scarf, the flower petals, a simple arrangement of forgotten things made sacred by the way they were offered. But it held more than that. It held presence. It held the memory of stillness shared. It held the quiet unfolding of hearts. He placed his hands gently around it and closed his eyes, not to sleep, not to retreat, but to rest within the fullness of this moment, the last breath of a day that had asked for nothing and given everything. The wind moved once more through the tamarind tree, and the moon cast its final blessing. And in that silent, perfect stillness, one last truth bloomed, so quietly it needed no voice at all. There are bowls that hold food, and there are bowls that hold the soul. Tonight, this one held both.